Welcome to Friend Crush. I'm your host, Amber Akilla. This is my podcast where I talk about stuff and things, cute, chaotic, and critical thinking, being hot, and having fun. You can follow me on Instagram, TikTok, SoundCloud, Spotify, YouTube, and then at Amber Akilla. And then the main page for this podcast is at friend.crush on Instagram. And I always really appreciate it when people write in and send me feedback, thoughts, questions. Even if I don't get back to you like in the moment, I save what you have written to me and I always consider it for future episodes and content. And I'm also thinking about doing video content instead of audio content because then at least you have the option of video or audio. But yeah, if you have any thoughts on that, would love to know your opinion. I think I'm just like kind of camera shy for long form videos, but I just have to get over it, I guess, because that's where the money is. Anyway, today's episode, I'm joined by Nadine Milad. She is born and raised in Los Angeles. She's a writer, actress, and content creator. She makes really thoughtful content on TikTok, talking about relationships and dating. And in our episode today, we talk about getting over ghosting, going through really big life transitions, and just, I don't know, we cover so many different topics. I'm going to try and put timestamps in the description. And yeah, I hope you enjoy this episode. Let me know what you think once you've listened through. And yeah, I hope everyone's doing well. And without further ado, this is my conversation with Nadine. Hi Nadine, how are you?
Hi, Amber. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm very excited to record with you today.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Would you like to introduce yourself to Friend Crush listeners? Tell us who you are, where you're at, what you're doing.
Hi, Friend Crush listeners. I'm Nadine. I'm a writer. I'm an actor. I'm a accidental content creator. I have a podcast called Hot and Insecure. Mm-hmm. You guys can, I started making TikTok videos about my life and people seem to really like it and vibe with me. So I vibe with them back. So I have a, pretty good following on TikTok. If you guys want to follow me, my TikTok is Nadine Milad. And then on Instagram, it's Nadine Milad _. And then my YouTube channel is Nadine Milad.
Where do we want to start? I don't even know how to segue into this. You're based in LA.
I'm based in LA right now.
But we mentioned that before that you're thinking of moving to New York.
Yeah, definitely thinking about it. I don't know. It's just this feeling that I have. I think apart from me wanting to make a major career change and feeling going to New York and starting over and really going for that, a lot of my friends left LA during and after the pandemic, and LA is one of those places where it's really spread out. If you haven't been to LA, it's I know you have, but if there are certain listeners who haven't been, LA is not one city. It's several cities in the same county. And it's very spread out, and they're all connected through highways and, freeways, and it gets isolating because you're not, it's very easy to feel isolated in Los Angeles because everything is so spread out, and Los Angeles is so big.
Yeah, it really reminds me of Perth, actually. That's why I have, this love-hate relationship with LA, because I had a very love-hate relationship with Perth when I was growing up, and it's also spread out, because I grew up in the suburbs, and I feel it's so hard to just organize to do things spontaneously with people sometimes, because it's they're across town, or everyone kind of lives in their own little bubble. And what I loved so much about Shanghai, what I love about Shanghai is that it's so much more convenient to just meet up with someone, or oh, what are you doing today? I'm going to be in this area. Okay, we can meet there. But I feel it's so much harder to do that in cities like Perth and also LA. Yeah. And then there's just different times in your life where that is the right environment for you to be in, I guess. So you're already feeling you want to be, and New York is kind of similar to Shanghai in the way that it's easier to kind of get around. There's more flow to the city than there is in LA, it feels more like grid-like.
Yeah.
Almost. Unless you're just like in the same area as all your friends, it's difficult to cross those like inter-city boundaries.
Yeah.
Turf war.
Yeah, I also just find like people, I feel like there's this reputation of people in New York that they don't want to talk to you. They're like, they really keep to themselves. But I actually feel like that's really LA. Like in LA, people don't like socialize. They're not like really personable.
Much more like territorial with like their connections and their
life. Whereas I feel like because everything in New York is so condensed, you're more prone to meeting up with people and striking up conversations with people. And I don't know, I also just feel like there is people who are from LA are really cool, down to earth people, but it is very inundated with like transplants who think that there is this idea of what LA is, and they just ruin the vibe. Like they think they have to like perform, and they're really like I feel like it's hard to make like genuine connections in LA sometimes.
Yeah, and I can imagine especially like for the entertainment and creative industry as well. There's like so much competition and so many ideas about what it can be like or what it should be like. A lot of people chasing their dreams and like that can make it difficult to really connect with people beyond just like transactional, like purely transactional, like what am I getting out of this?
Yeah. And that was a hard thing for me to sort of understand once I started getting connected to more people in the industry. I mean, I've always sort of had one foot in the industry because I started modeling when I was like 20. And so I've always, like, I've had an agent, like a modeling agent, like, and a commercial agent. But when I really was like, okay, no, I'm going to, like, really try and work towards being, like, an actor, like, I'm going to start taking classes. It does seem really transactional. Or it's, like, very, like, I have a lot of people who are like, let's catch up. And then I never hear from them. We never make plans. It's, like, it's all very sort of surface level in that way. And not everyone is like that, but I just realized, like, it's really hard to connect with people emotionally here. In New York, I feel like the vibe is a bit different. I feel like people are more down to just get to know you. People don't care what you do, I feel like. You know, some people do, some people don't.
I think it's just, like, finding a balance between having, like, a core group, like your inner circle, and then recognizing that you only really have the capacity for like a certain number of close relationships, and then it's okay that anybody outside of that is like for work, for party, or like it's not going to be like as deep as that inner circle. And people come in and out of that inner circle too at different stages of your life. But
definitely
it's been like, for me, going from Shanghai to Perth back to Shanghai, the way that inner circle has changed for me, and being okay with that, like swapping in and out kind of thing. The space that's there, new people coming in, old friends maybe like moving out of it. I think that would have been much harder for me when I was younger. But this is like maybe the second round that I'm going through, and I'm like, okay, second major transition. So I think that as you get older, you realize that like your life is actually so long, and it's normal for that to happen, and it's not like a personal thing. If you just kind of like drift from a friend and they go in their own direction, you go in your own direction, and then someone else that's like more compatible with the path that you're on will take their place.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely, a lot of changing friendship dynamics happened, especially like during and after the pandemic. I feel like what I required from my relationships, I was really mindful that I wanted more meaningful relationships, and if friendships were going to end, then they were going to end, and I wasn't going to try and stay attached to them. But it is hard. Like, I remember, you know, one of my really, really good friends, actually I considered her my best friend. We actually have matching tattoos together. We sort of had a falling out, and it made me like sad, but at the same time I also like accepted it. You know, not everybody is supposed to stay in your life. And also I feel like I don't really trust people who are friends with everybody. Like, a friend to everyone is a friend to no one, you know?
Exactly. Yeah. You don't want someone that's just liked by everyone. You know?
Right. You got to be discerning with the things, with the company you keep, I feel like. You know, it's like, it's cool to have friends who are like, you're right, like, maybe more surface level friendships, or friendships that kind of serve their own purpose, their own specific purpose. But, like, I don't know. I think for the most part, I want people who I can connect with on like a deep emotional level. And that's actually like really hard when you start making that the standard and your filters are that high. Then a lot of people fall out. Like they can't meet that.
I think especially like at this age, or I mean at any stage in your life really, but I think the first major transition between like teenager to adulthood, I think kind of like after your mid 20s, that's when comes like the first big opportunity for people to really like dive deep into who they are. You've had like enough life experience and probably like romantic experience, friendship experiences, that you start to see patterns in yourself or in other people, and it's like, okay, are you going to take this opportunity to reflect and maybe heal parts of you that you weren't aware of before, like integrate that shadow part of yourself, or are you just going to ignore it and keep pushing forward and allowing it to affect parts of your life? And I don't think that whether people do or don't do this is like a good or bad thing, but I think for me it's like when it's obvious like who is willing to do that and who is growing from it and who has just chosen to ignore it. And it's very difficult when you've done that work to connect deeply with someone who hasn't, because you've already people can only meet you at the depth at which you've met yourself. So you see the ways that you've been able to confront those parts of yourself and what it has meant for you, what it has done for you in terms of your own growth. You want to encourage other people to do that too. And then when people aren't ready to do that, it's like a rift just naturally occurs, because the depth at which they've met themselves is not as deep as where you've met yourself. So the way that you can connect starts to become incompatible. And I think that's like a really big thing that I've noticed.
Definitely.
In some of my like friendship dynamics, it's like I understand like where they're at and why they are the way they are, and their desire to be better or different, but also like they're not yet ready to like face that part of themselves or be vulnerable with themselves in that way, and as a result not vulnerable with you either. And then you're kind of like holding space, but like nothing is meeting.
Yeah, it's like a void space.
In that space.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
People are on different paths, like emotionally and in terms of their development. And it's one thing when I guess I started healing more and integrating this shadow part of me and like really trying to face the parts of me that were hard to face. There is a lot of confrontation with that, because no one wants to look at the parts of themselves that they don't like. And it's difficult for people. Sometimes I don't want to do it. And there are periods of time where I don't want to do it. Like I'm just existing.
Yeah.
But I always sort of come back to that part of myself, and I have to respect that some people just aren't there, and there's no judgment, because it is difficult. I have people.
Yeah. And you remember the times when you weren't yet there, and you look back and you're like, oh, if only I'd recognized like this, but you're like, okay, well, I had to realize it at this stage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm like, damn, like I wish I would have, like, I'm so different now. Like I wish I would have like probably met certain people at a different stage of my life, but it is what it is. Like, taking on the responsibility of wanting to be a more intentional person and a better person is, and that's not to say that people who don't take this path are inherently bad people, but it is hard to meet someone at that same emotional depth when you just feel like you're kind of not lying, but you're putting on a performance. And so you're less concerned with wanting to perform because you're trying to get to the bottom of who you are, and your pool of people that you want to be close to also shrinks, and you guys just aren't aligned anymore. And that's sort of like the thing, so with like one of this close friend that, just to make a point here, my ex-bestie who I have the tattoo with, there were like, it was like a couple years coming where like I wanted to end, like there were things that she would do or say that like didn't align with the way that she acted, and I felt like, you know, I don't want to end this friendship, but like I wasn't ready. But I was getting to a point where like I needed to really heal myself and like my traumas, and like when I did, I realized like she's just not at that level, and I was resisting letting this friendship go. And then when I ended up sort of realizing all of this, it was just sort of like this peaceful letting go. Like, I don't need to force or change the situation. And if, you know, I'll let her know that I'm here for her. But if we never, like, connect again, then I'm totally fine with that. And this just sort of fell off. And there's, like, beauty in, like, realizing that you don't have to be mad at people for, relationships ending, you know?
And there doesn't have to be, like, a confrontation or, like, a fight about it. It's just like letting that space kind of expand as it needs to, and then being open to the fact that it might close again one day. You might be closer again, or you might not. But I totally relate to that, like being in a friendship that you are not really, that maybe it's by circumstance or by whatever reason you were really close with them at one point, and then you start to realize either you're changing or you're seeing them for who they really are, and you're no longer as compatible as you want to believe that you are, or you thought that you were. And then, yeah, I think just like being okay with no longer being compatible anymore, and you can still wish each other the best from a distance. I mean, I don't think my ex-bestie breakup was as smooth as yours based on what you've described, but it was still like a similar feeling. Like, I relate to that. Like, you want them in your life, you care about them, you have all this shared history together, you had all these plans that you wanted to share in the future, but like in the present moment, in reality, it's just not going to work without you like sacrificing a part of yourself, or like not really owning a part of yourself.
But yeah, no, it's sometimes you have to wrestle with that. Like, it was really hard because it's like, I'm trying to force you to be this thing that I want you to be for me, because I want you to be in my life. And it's this like resistance that you have because you don't want to let go. I always try to remember, like, when you don't force things, like, that's sort of the best way to go about things. Like, when you just surrender and let go. Yeah. And that goes for relationships. And I think the resistance comes from us, like, not wanting to let go. But then you're making room for better and newer and more compatible relationships to enter your life. And, like, when you meet, like, a friend who you're, like, friend crushing on, no pun intended. But when you meet someone romantic or platonic, or even like professionally, who you just like have aligned with similar values, and the conversations just flow, and you guys are able to meet each other at like a deeper level, it's so much more fulfilling. And like you kind of thank yourself that you allowed space for something like that to happen.
Yeah, and I think also just reminding people that, like, just because you can accept that you're no longer compatible with someone doesn't necessarily mean that the pain of losing them diminishes, I think, because I think on a subconscious level, we're all looking for ways to avoid pain. Like, that's why we have resistance to allowing the space between a close friendship to form, because we're afraid of how much it might hurt to lose them, or to like be faced with whatever the new situation is. But I think something that I try to remind myself, and like anybody who watches or listens to anything that I make, it's like, just because you can accept that a situation is difficult doesn't necessarily make it less difficult to go through, but at least you have something to hold on to, like, in that process, which is like remembering to trust yourself more than you're like externalizing your trust into another person. Because I always get people asking me, like, how do I trust myself after being betrayed by somebody else, or feeling like I've been betrayed, or realizing something that I wasn't ready to realize. And I think the lesson is always to learn to trust yourself in spite of how somebody else might treat you. You know, like, you don't have control over what other people are going to do. They're going to do what they're going to do. But as long as you have your own back, irrespective of how other people treat you, then that's what's going to carry you through to the next phase of your life with a healthier foundation. Like, you might feel like your whole foundation has been eroded, but when you take responsibility for rebuilding it, that's when you, especially like when you take responsibility for rebuilding it in the image of like who you want to be, like your higher self, then that's what is going to like, that's the little thread that's going to like drag you through the darkness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think sometimes we go through these cognitive distortions of like hindsight bias, or like we should have known, like, you know, like, but like you didn't know that you're expanding your consciousness by finding out. Like, it's always easy to say, oh, I shouldn't have reacted like this, or I should have known this. Like, we were just talking about red flags before this. Like, I missed all these red flags, and it's like, yeah, but, you know, you didn't know that they were red flags at the time. Now you know for next time. Yeah. And because of these experiences, that adds to you trusting yourself. And it's hard, especially when you go through really negative experiences where it seems like it was really obvious that you were being like emotionally manipulated or something like that. Whatever you can apply this to anything, but like it's so easy to put the blame on ourselves when it's like, no, like people who are manipulated in any capacity, they don't know they're being manipulated. That kind of defeats
that's the point.
That's the point. Yeah, that's the point. Yeah. Manipulation is quiet and is covert, and but yeah, I think you're right. Learning to trust yourself, and even just trusting that like you were trusting yourself at that point. And people make mistakes, like that's part of life. That doesn't mean that you have betrayed yourself, you know. It just means that you're going through a hard time because of something that happened, but we learn from those experiences.
Yeah, I think as long as you have an understanding of the ways that you could like better approach something next time, that is in and of itself a triumph from like a shitty or a negative experience. Because like we also discussed before, like the types of relationship dynamics that I've been in have always shown me like the same thing. Like it's the same lesson at the end in a slightly different package. And then at some point it was like up to me to be like, okay, if I want to experience a different kind of relationship, then I have to approach things differently. I can't look at the role a romantic relationship plays in my life the same if I want to have a different outcome, or I can't ignore the same things and think that it's going to be different just because it's a different person, whether that is romantic relationship, platonic relationship, work relationship experience. It's like, if you're not applying what you've learned from before to now and how you move through to the next stage, then of course you're going to be going through the same shit over and over and over. And a lot of people just get stuck in these kinds of loops and externalize blame as well. It's like, it's always someone else's fault that they are having the same kind of experience, being treated the same way. But it's like being able to confront yourself and take responsibility without blaming yourself. You know, like it's not your fault that bad things have happened, but it's like, okay, what can you do so that it doesn't happen in the same way again? Yeah. With a different like wrapping.
Yeah. One thing I really talk about a lot on TikTok, and one thing I really try and push when people ask me for advice on TikTok, is I really try to push self-forgiveness. Like, because I'm so critical on myself naturally, because that's just the way I was, you know, that's just the way I was brought up. Is I grew up with like, I love my mom, but she was extremely critical on me. And so I took that voice in my head. And now, you know, ironically, my mom tells me like, go easy on yourself. But I put so much pressure on myself. And like when I mess up or when I make a mistake or when I go through an experience that was really difficult for me emotionally, I blame myself. And like one thing about shame and like making yourself feel bad is it keeps you from moving on and learning lessons, because you're just stuck in that cycle of shame. Like, you're stuck on like blaming yourself about the situation, as opposed to accepting that like you're a human, you made a mistake, it's okay. It's okay. And that's one thing I always stress in my TikTok videos is like, forgive yourself. Like, you didn't know that you were gonna react, like you didn't know that this was gonna happen. And even if you reacted poorly, you know, like you're still a human being. And when you're just fixated on the situation and how you reacted or what your part in it, it keeps us from like moving on, and it breeds more shame. And shame is like this all consuming, it's like the worst feeling in the world. I really feel like it's one of those things that keep people even oppressed in society. Like, you know, like when you think about racism still exists today because of shame. Like, shame brought on from one race to another, and people have internalized that shame and now not keep themselves, because it's a systemic issue, but like that's how it's perpetuated, is when people don't love themselves and they feel like they are inherently wrong. It keeps us from like truly healing and like moving on in life. And it's just learning to extract the lessons, but not extracting the blame, the self-blame. Like, at the end of the day, you know, people, one thing I tell myself, I'm like, if the president fucked up and like fucked Monica Lewinsky and then lied about it and got impeached for it, like, that was a big mistake. And he's living his life, you know? I don't know what the Clintons are up to. Probably some shady shit. But, like, you know, like
shadier
that...
than you could even imagine. Like,
oh, definitely. Definitely.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's like, if people like that mess up, you know, if Jay-Z can cheat on Beyonce and fuck up that badly, I can forgive myself for being emotional about this thing that happened, or, like, reacting a certain way. It's just, like... And it's so... And we can only give ourselves that, right? Like, no one can forgive us for the way that we feel. We only can give ourselves that, like, grace to feel our feelings and not feel shame about them. And once you do that, it's like you're literally, like, you're, like, putting down, like, 7 heavy boxes, and you're like, I'm free. Like, I don't need to feel this anymore.
Yeah. I think for me, like, I totally relate to what you're saying in terms of like being extremely self-critical and like internalizing blame. I think it's very common for people to feel that way. And also the way that shame is like weaponized in our society as a form of oppression and control, as well as like so pervasive. It's so normalized to try and like put people down or to make people feel less than or not enough in order to get a one up. Like, and it happens in small ways, whether it's in like the TikTok social media comment section, whether it's in the way that news is written, whether it's in the way that politicians behave or like society is organized. So it's so hard to take a moment to have self-compassion and self-forgiveness. And I think that for me, maybe dominant fire sign energy is turning shame into like accepting the presence of shame and like using it as fuel, like turning shame into spite, turning shame into like a reason to then embrace like audacity. Like, you can feel ashamed. It's normal to feel shame as a human being. It's not about never feeling shame again, but it's like, what do you do after you start to feel shame? It's like, okay, well, like you said, sometimes you just have to think about a white male politician and how much power they wield and how easily they fuck up and how they're so full of shit that it's like, if I can take even a little bit of that audacity, that's all I need, you know? Like, I don't even need to be like that. And I'm already, and I think also growing up in this kind of like having like a sort of racial awakening, and then also sort of there is shame and guilt that comes with being able to embrace who you are in spite of the struggles that like your community might still face on a wider scale. And then like, oh, are you problematic even though you're like trying to help, and like how do you unlearn and untangle these like things? But then I'm literally like, even the most problematic thing that I could do would be like a good day for like a regular guy. So I need to stress less And then also like the way that spite comes into it, it's like sometimes you just need to prove to like either your former self or the person that has broken your trust that you're not going to be defined by that experience. And that in and of that can drive you forward. It drives me forward. And then you get to a point where you're actually doing it for yourself and you feel the satisfaction of like working and embracing and learning and understanding. And then like whatever pushed you in that direction becomes like a distant memory to you. It's already like you've poured enough into yourself that it's actually you and not you trying to pour into somebody else. Or like you hemorrhaging your energy in a direction that doesn't really serve you in any way. But I think that's such an important relationship to understand. I think like how we allow shame to affect us, for how long, to what extent, because it's normal that it comes up.
I think it's important to transmute it in any way. Like for me, shame turns into anger. Like I'm so ashamed of myself for the way that I'm just so ashamed of myself for how I allow this person to treat me. And I can only feel that for so long until I realize I'm angry at this person for treating me this way. And transmuting that into something, anger can be very powerful for me.
Yeah.
And it could be powerful for many people. I mean, even like what's going on in Iran right now, it's like that's anger that's built up from an oppressive theocracy, like this tyrannical political movement. Like people get so sick of feeling shame. Why should I feel shame for covering myself up? Why should you dictate how I live my life? I'm sick of feeling this shame. I'm going to instead now feel anger because how dare you make me feel shame, you know, for being me.
Yeah, and that anger is an indication of like our boundaries being crossed.
Yeah,
and like
absolutely.
Crossed so many times to a point where we recognize that we've lost agency or we're losing agency over our own lives, that it pushes you in a productive direction. I think. And
absolutely.
We're also made to feel shame about anger, like, oh, you can't be angry, like toxic positivity, like kumbaya. And I'm like,
no,
I don't think so.
Yeah, no, fuck
I
that.
don't get angry about much, so if I know that I'm pissed off, something's wrong.
Yeah, and anger could be, it's like it propels you. Like it propels you to want to pour into yourself. And you know, and I think like what you said about eventually it doesn't become about the other person. I think like our anger towards people is like a conduit of us really just doing what we need to do for ourselves. Like it was never like when enough time passes and you've like done the thing that you've done and you've poured into yourself as a result of someone like mistreating you or something, you realize like it was never even about them. The whole time, the whole situation from start to finish was about me. And they were just the thing that sort of incited this life lesson or the thing that I needed to learn. Because people like really like the biggest teachers are our relationships with people. All kinds of relationships. Like you only learn about yourself and you only grow because of your relationships. Yeah. I think that's also really important to recognize now, like especially post-pandemic era. It's not even post-pandemic, like we're still very much in a pandemic, but like people realizing how important like social connection is to us. Like we truly are social beings when we've had the ability to socialize taken away from us, and then how we cope with that, how we readjust, I think has shown me or has given me a new appreciation for the thing that I've always been exploring, which is like connection and relationships in general, specifically the importance of like friendship, platonic relationships, and how that is a foundation to healthy romantic relationships. But I think, you know, for some people in this time, it's pushed them into isolation and an idea that you need to be like fully independent, self-sufficient, not reliant on anybody. But it's like finding this balance between being able to hold on to yourself while also connecting to others and being willing to like
open parts of yourself up, and then, like we said, like still trusting yourself in spite of how somebody might treat like what you offer to them. I think that's like a big thing that I've learned or been able to reflect on recently. It's like there's no shame in me being who I am with somebody that I care about and that I love, but it's not up to me how they receive that, you know. And if they don't receive it in a way that is respectful, in a way that shows appreciation and value for what I have to offer, then it's within my right to just withdraw that from them. There's no reason why I have to continue to give, to prove to somebody that they should value what I'm offering. Like if they fundamentally don't, or they don't have the capacity to, it's not my responsibility to change their mind. It's actually my responsibility to recognize and honor like the things that I'm willing to give, and then find somebody that's going to appreciate that, rather than try to force someone into appreciating something that they, for whatever reason, may or may not be ready for or don't understand. It's actually not our job. And it doesn't mean that what I have to offer or what you have to offer isn't valuable or isn't valid. It's just like finding the right like situation for it to flourish in and be appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like if you describe yourself as a people pleaser, I am. I constantly, like, I want people to like me, you know. I think that's like a normal thing, because I want I want connection. I don't want people to not like me. I want people to like me. And oftentimes like what sort of people generally are learning now is like that could be really maladaptive, because you're kind of forfeiting your own boundaries and what you're willing to put up with, and you're overly accommodating other people, and may even, you know, accept and tolerate disrespect when like, you know, it hurts you. And like, you know, being yourself and stating your opinions is something that sometimes I'm still learning. Like I sometimes will have really strong opinions about something, and like someone will be in a room with me and say something completely, like something I completely disagree with, and there's like trepidation when I like want to express my opposing opinion, because I'm like, well, I don't want this person to not like me. And you know, it's like this weird thing that I've like been conditioned, and I think a lot of women have been conditioned, and especially like, I don't know if you experience this as like an Asian woman, but like as an Arab woman, like growing up as a little girl, I was taught like the most important thing was like I had to be sweet and agreeable. And like now I am unlearning that, and I don't need to be agreeable. I need to be myself. And if someone like says something that I don't like agree with, or is just downright like disrespectful to me or like a group of people, being comfortable with not being agreeable and like stating my opinion, even if that means having someone not like me. It's difficult, but it's like I have to be like, you have to be authentic. And I think that's kind of like ties into what we were saying even in the very beginning, is like being a more authentic version of yourself, so that you can attract people who agree with you, and like fuck the people that don't agree with you, or like don't like align with you, you know. Who cares about being likable? But that is genuinely something people have to actively unlearn. I mean, I remember like very recently I was at a bar and someone said something like slightly homophobic, and it was like this guy that my friend was like flirting with, and like, you know, I was like, Nadine, don't be a vibe killer, like don't be a vibe killer. And then I was like, actually that's kind of like low-key homophobic. And it like caused some like, we got into this like, not argument, but this like heated discussion, and I was just like, yeah, but like that's still homophobic. And then anyways, I like told my friend, I was like, you're gonna like go home with this guy, he's like doesn't like gay people, like. And it was just like, it was like kind of, I was kidding, but I wasn't, but it was like, that makes me uncomfortable. Like like people like, not that they disagree with me, but like when they say something that's like objectively like wrong, right? Like, or like wrong in the sense that like it perpetuates like violence or like stereotypes in some way towards a group of people, or just like something I just like, fundamentally like does not align with me, I don't want to be around those people. So why do I care if they like me? And like being brave enough to be like, actually I don't agree with you, you know, or even, and it doesn't even have to go that far, but like just being like, even if I'm like in a work meeting and I'm like, I don't agree, I think that this is like this is my take on it, and you never know how people are going to take even just something like that. But it's just like not taking on the responsibility of people's emotions is something that's really important, and I'm learning, like I'm still learning at the age of 27. Like I can be fully present in my body and in my mind and like say what I need to say without worrying how someone else is going to receive it or take it. And if they don't receive me or take me well, then that's fine. Like I don't need everybody to like me.
Yeah, I think learning, like, there's also a strategy to communication when it comes to dealing with people, like you said, that don't really align, or like are saying things that can perpetuate violence or create like a mindset, or which then follows through action in a way that can be harmful to others. Like communicating in a way that gives them space to explore the way that they think in a way that allows you to give them an opportunity to question it without like shaming them or shutting them down so that they double down on their point of view in opposition to you. It's like, how do you create an opportunity to say like, oh, have you thought about like how what you're saying might impact someone from that group, or like do you know where that sort of idea comes from? I think is also something that I've had to learn as somebody who I think maybe started to be involved in this, I don't want to say it's like woke culture, but it's just like I think I was much more aware of inequalities and the racism and misogyny that I would experience at a younger age than most people of my generation. And I don't say that as a flex, because it was actually like very traumatic for me to go through that.
Yeah.
But like before it was cool to talk about like feminism on social media, before that was even like a thing for people our age, it was like I was making Facebook statuses like satirizing the racism I was experiencing in when like everybody that I knew was basically white. Like I was not around any people of color. And like I didn't have like an inner circle of people that understood my experience or could like really empathize. Even like the few friends of color that I had, they were not yet aware of what these like microaggressions, macroaggressions that we were experiencing were actually like a form of violence. And I was struggling to grapple with that. My friends of color didn't get it. White friends didn't get it. It was like such an isolating experience. I would literally get like death threats from people about literally speaking about my experience with racism. Like suddenly I'm the bad guy for pointing out that someone has been like extremely disrespectful to me. And I think like that has, and especially like people that I was close to not understanding it. Like I cared about this person as a friend. They said that they cared about me as a friend, but then would deny my experience and need me to like somehow validate their whiteness before they were able to validate the racism that I'd experienced. So that had taught me a lot about how to speak to people in a way that it's like, because you've already progressed so far in your experience and your understanding of something, it's frustrating when you're like, how does this person not get it? But you realize that they've come from a different context of understanding and way of seeing the world, that it's more about like creating a space for them to question their ideas before you like shut them down for it. If what your like ultimate goal is to like make progress rather than just like figure out like who's right and who's wrong. But then that's separate to the other thing that I wanted to respond to in terms of like people pleasing, like you describing how you were always made to feel like you needed to be nice and agreeable. Like I relate to that in a way, but at the same time, I think my experience is I've always been perceived as someone who is not a people pleaser because I had an opinion from a young age. I would always be told that I had resting bitch face. So I had internalized this idea that people already don't like me or like already are afraid of me, so that the idea of me being a people pleaser never crossed my mind until I realized that I actually am a people pleaser.
Right.
Like in my personal relationships, it's like I actually do give to my own detriment to maintain a connection, or to maintain the idea of a connection or a relationship, without expressing like what my boundaries actually are or saying no. So yeah, that's been like the same people pleasing like dynamic that I needed to unlearn, but like in a slightly different way, which I think is kind of interesting how it manifests.
Yeah. You know, I kind of grew up very like, I relate to that a lot. Like I like growing up, I felt like there was a very distinct time in my life when I was around like 12, 13, 14, where I literally felt like no one fucking liked me, dude. Like I was taught to be agreeable, but I really wasn't. Like I was like the middle kid, I was the middle child. I'd always been more disagreeable in the context of like my family. I would always talk back. Like I would always question why, and like my Arab dad was like, stop asking me why, just obey the rules. And I'm like, but why? But like why, you know? And so I felt like, you know, there was this streak in me of being sort of like a nonconformist, and I've always questioned authority. That's just in my nature. But it doesn't take away, that doesn't also take away from the fact that I also like, it's part of, I think it's just part of being a woman, honestly, like being sweet, being loved. Like in order to be loved, you have to be agreeable, and you can't be too opinionated. It's like these two conflicting sides of being a woman and like growing into your womanhood, but also like just girlhood. Like you want to rebel, it's normal to want to question things and like assert your own individuality when everyone is telling you to be a certain way, right? And it's like, well, I always had this idea that I was like this person that always disagreed with people, but like at the same time it's like, but I also, and when I get older, especially like in my mid-20s, I feel like my mid-20s really like like everything about my development was like slapping me really hard in the face. And I had to face them, and I'm like, shit, I am a people pleaser. Like I actually am willing to compromise my opinions, my thoughts, my feelings, because I want people to like me. And that has to do with my development. Like at the same time, while I am someone who probably was more disagreeable than others, that doesn't take away from the fact that I still have been conditioned that the most important thing to be loved and to be accepted, especially if I wanted to be someone's wife one day, was that I can't be difficult. But it's like, how do I reconcile the two parts of myself? You know, how do I reconcile being a people pleaser but also wanting to feel heard and feel like I'm not silenced in any way, you know?
Yeah, because I think for me, like I would share a lot of opinions like online. So like a stranger's perception of me is obviously like, oh, she's sassy, she's blah, blah, blah. But then in my like personal, close, in real life relationships, realizing that people pleasing is not just about the opinions that you share or don't share with someone. It's also about, you know, how you manage your time with the people that you care about. Like, oh, someone's not available the time that you want to, someone wants to hang out with you, their availability is this, and then suddenly you're changing your whole schedule to make yourself available for this person when you might have other things that you need to do, but you're not prioritizing, you're not expressing what your priorities are, and being able to actually like find out if you're truly compatible with this person, or you're just like jumping through all these hoops to make something work, when like you could actually just assert what is important to you and believe that that's also important to the other person, rather than holding their priorities more important than your own. I think when I realized the difference between those things, it was like a really big shift in how I understood myself and my relationships. And I remember my therapist at one point, I was like telling, one of the things that I went into therapy wanting to work on was like this desire that I always have to like save people, or like to facilitate their growth, like save them from the pain that I've experienced. Like I recognize that you're going through something I've been through. If you just think of it this way, like you won't have to go through the same pain as me, because then it would somehow make what I had been through like worth it if I could like stop somebody else from making the same mistake. And then she was just like, well, you know, that's like avoidant behavior, like that's a form of self-abandonment. I was like, what? And then I was like, oh, because I'm trying to, like, instead of like directing that energy towards me and the parts of me that I want to work on, I'm thinking like, if I can get somebody else to change, then that makes what I've been through valid, when in reality it's like applying what I've gone through to myself, not other people, and then having a healthier outlet for that part of me. So I think that's why, like, doing the podcast or like the stuff that I make on TikTok, it's like so much more rewarding for me to just share my perspective, and then the people that are ready to hear it are like, this makes so much sense to me, okay, this is actually going to help me, versus like just talking to my friends. It's like, she's not done till she's done, she's just going to keep dating this guy, and there's nothing that I can do to stop her. But my job is just to be there as her friend and to give her advice when I can without being invested in the outcome, you know? And I think it's so much more rewarding for me to realize that it's like, I can't like stop anyone from doing what they're going to do, but I can just share my perspective, and there might be something there that's helpful to someone in their journey, and then they can take ownership of that, rather than me feeling like I have to be there and hold your hand every step of the way.
Definitely.
Yeah, that was like so crazy when my therapist was like, it's avoidant behavior for you.
Oh my God, that's crazy. People. Yeah, because I definitely feel that way too. I feel like I'm Captain Save-A-Ho. Like I want to save people from feeling the pain that I've experienced.
Yeah, and you see their potential too, and you're like, why can't you see what I see in you? But then it's like, but why can't you see that in yourself?
Yeah, why can't I see that in myself? And it's also like, I think it's a way for us to control sort of what happened to us. Like, it's like, if I can like manipulate this situation, then yeah, it not only makes my experience meaningful, but it's like, maybe I can in a way like redo it. Like, it's kind of like it's kind of the same concept of like, if I find someone who reminds me of my dad who was emotionally unavailable, but I make them available for me, I'm just trying to replay this. I'm trying to change this relationship dynamic and turn it into something else. But I think it's sort of the same concept. And I also think it's sort of a way to exercise intellectualizing our emotions instead of actually feeling them and accepting them for what they are.
Because humans are, whether we are willing to like become aware of it or accept it or not, it's like we are recreating like childhood relationship dynamics and like subconsciously trying to relive them and then rewrite them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when you realize that like it's not always obvious, because it's never obvious when we're going through it. It's not like there's a voice in our head that's like, this guy reminds me of my dad and I'm going to recreate this relationship and then rewrite the ending. Like it's there is no awareness when you're going through it that that's what you're doing, until you look back and you're like, okay, when I think about like the way that this relationship dynamic played out when I was younger and the way that I was approaching the most recent relationship that I've been in, and then how there are parallels there, and like what can I learn from that, I think that's a really powerful and transformative experience to go through. Definitely not easy, and not something that many people...
And it takes years to possibly unlearn this. Some people never do. And I'm in a position where I'm sort of learning how to let myself be loved by someone who shows me that they're emotionally available from the jump, you know? And sometimes I don't even know what that looks like. Because I have a habit of going for emotionally unavailable men as well. Because I'm trying to save them a lot of the time. Like, I feel like I sometimes come off as like a comforting energy to them. But you said something earlier along the lines of like, we as humans we will come up with wild and imaginative ways to avoid our own pain. Like, that's how we protect ourselves. Like, psychologically, it's innate. And I think, you know, that could be like a way, is that like we try and fix people, or we try and, it's just like these crazy subconscious like things that we do to avoid our own pain. Like, we don't want to, it's much easier to admit or to tell someone you have to leave your boyfriend because he's cheating on you, as opposed to really facing the hurt and trauma that we went through when our boyfriend cheated on us, or like when our, you know, it doesn't even have to be something like that. It's just like, I think you should save money by doing this, you know, and like do this, this, and this. We don't want to have to relive the feeling of feeling stuck and not being comfortable financially. And it's like a way for us to exercise protecting ourselves in a way, because we don't want to have to even face that emotion. So much so, we don't even want the people around us to face these emotions.
Yeah. I actually just was thinking about how, like, when we're talking about attracting emotionally unavailable men, and then also like this
love that
I'm like, thing.
Yeah, it's like, that's like if there was an Olympic sport for fixing and rehabilitating emotionally unavailable men, I would be the gold medalist. Is that the word? I would receive the gold medal.
Yeah. What I'm realizing literally in real time is like this avoidance of pain obviously manifests in people differently. And for some people, they avoid pain by seeking distraction. And then for other people, they avoid pain by trying to plug in and like fix other people's pain. And when I think about some of the relationship dynamics I've been in, it's like I'm definitely the one that wants to plug in and fix things, and then the guy is always the one that's actually running away from something. So they're actually in distraction mode and I'm in fixing mode. And then these energies somehow come together, and the lesson is, I'm going to try to fix you. You're realizing now what you're running from. Are you ready to face it? And then I'm like, I'm always trying to fix things. I can actually just enjoy my own life without needing to worry about other people's problems. And I think the lesson that I've had from those dynamics is like, I realize that that person is actually running from something when we're together. Like, it seems like this perfect match because they feel relieved. Like, it's like this relief when you're together, because it's like, now you're seeing someone who's like needs a little bit of fixing. Like, you're like, oh, I can see how like I can improve your life in these ways because I can do these things that you aren't so good at. And for them, they're like, oh my God, finally I found this girl who's like different from whatever. Yeah, different from whatever
she's like
I'm
mom.
experiencing. Like whatever pain like they're running from, they're like, I'm connecting to her, and like now the pain's gone. But then your karmic dynamic is like you realizing that, oh, they actually have a lot of shit that they need to work on themselves. You can't actually fix it. Like, your presence alone is not going to change them, because like we discussed before, like they have this whole life before you that they've been playing out, and like you're just like you as 0.1% is not enough to change them if they haven't decided that. And then, but your presence gives them an opportunity to see, oh, I've actually been running from some kind of pain that I'm not ready to confront. And whether they choose to confront it or not is not up to you. And most of the time they choose not to and continue to distract themselves. But I think that's
but what's interesting is like I also feel like we are also like the fixers are also we are also trying to distract ourselves. Like, it's our way of distracting ourselves is by taking on other people's problems so that we don't have to look at our own shit.
We're avoiding pain in different. It's both based on an avoidance of pain, but the manifestation in our behavior and our like mindset and approach is different. But that's what attracts you to that person. That avoidance of pain.
Yeah. And what ends up happening is like we end up taking on their pain. Like, we absorb it, and then we end up hurt because we feel like used afterward. Like, damn it, you tried to use me to make yourself feel good.
But they
and it's
stay
like,
hurt too.
No, like, you wanted... They stay hurt too, and now we have a whole bunch of other issues after this relationship ends, where like we're dealing with their hurt and now our hurt, and now they're dealt with like, and I don't think it's like obviously it's unconscious. Like, I feel like if no one consciously goes into these situations, but like we avoid ourselves. Like I said, like there are so many ways. There are 101 ways that people avoid themselves. That's why there's addiction. That's why there's procrastination. Like, we avoid ourselves in 1,001 different ways. And to some people that's, oh, let me find someone who's going to fix me in a non-healthy, productive way, like therapy. But even then, that's really like just you fixing yourself. And for other people, and I think people like us who have sort of a nurturing and empathetic energy, and I just think that sort of comes with our conditioning as women, is we want to, instead of fixing our own life, we'd rather just work on someone else's because it's easier and it seems more controllable.
Because you can intellectualize
even
it
though
as
that's
well.
not
You're
really
just like, oh, I can see exactly what you need to do. It's A, B, C.
And I think it also makes us feel a little bit superior. Like, not superior in that, like, I'm better than you, but it makes us feel like, oh, if I have the answers, then I must have it figured out. But it's like, no, baby, no.
That's why I always...
That's not the case.
I always think it's like, take what resonates with you, but don't assume that... Like, the theory can make sense even if the person is not practicing it. You know, like, the principles are the same and we're all figuring out how to apply them to our own life. And I think for both of us, like, the type of content that we make, it's like, I'm not just talking to, like, the listener. Like, I'm talking to a part of myself. Like, I'm reassuring myself by understanding and trying to communicate these ideas because I know that I need to hear it too, or that I need to process it. Like, someone commented...
I think that's really...
Yeah.
Yeah, no, go
someone
ahead.
commented on, like, an old video of mine, and I'd totally forgotten I'd even made it. And I was like, oh, I actually needed to be reminded of, like, this exact thing from my former self.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, we forget our own lessons. Like, our progress is, you know, insert Instagram therapy infographic. Our therapy is not... Our healing is not linear. Linear. That's how you pronounce that word. I'm not good at English sometimes. I, like, speak such shit Arabic. Arabic is my first language, but then anytime I, like mess up English, I'm like, oh, my excuse is English is not my first language.
Like, literally me, like, moving back to China and trying to, like, revitalize my Mandarin, which is already, like, not good. And then literally, like, I'm thinking in, like, Chinglish half the time. Like, I've gotten worse at English as a result of trying to improve my Mandarin, but my Mandarin is still not fluent. And I'm just like...
Am I even, like, can I communicate with anyone at this point? No, exactly. Yeah. But our healing is not linear. And that's, I think that's why I started making those kinds of videos on YouTube. I mean, on TikTok, was because I really needed to talk to myself. And I felt like if I made a video on it, and this is obviously coming from a part of myself that, like, knows better and is now, like, it's for selfish reasons, but if it resonates with people, then I'm glad it helps, you know? And it's interesting. Like, when you choose to grow and when you choose to be more authentic and speak from a place of, like, honesty, and that might sometimes come in the form of advice or just, like, vulnerability, people really connect with that.
Yeah, I think especially like not just honesty in the way that you speak, but also in the way that you act is, like, true authenticity. Because I think online there's this idea that, like, oh, someone who's just, like, really open and, like, transparent about, like, being sad or, like, taking a shit, that's, like, authentic, when in reality it translates beyond the internet. It's like, can you actually be true to yourself in the way that you engage with other people instead of, like, minimizing who you are to make other people comfortable? It's like, it's not even about, like, asserting yourself. Sometimes it's just, like, being okay with not vibing with this person and not feeling like you have to overextend yourself to gain their approval when there's, like, no reason for you to do that. Because I think, that's such an important part of, like, growing into your authenticity. It's not just putting on a show, but it's also, like, living that in your in-person reactions. That's where the change happens the most. You can easily change your opinion that you share, but, like, how do you change your behavior, which then in turn shifts the dynamics of your relationships and your experience of life. But yeah, easier said than done.
And I just think, like, whether you're giving advice on TikTok or, like, whether you're trying to fix your boyfriend, you know, it's like, we might come from a place that, like, in terms of, like, how people receive it, like, people might not be ready to hear it, but if you do you know, express your thoughts and you give helpful advice and you're putting it out there, whether or not they receive it, when they're ready to receive it, they'll remember that, you know? And I think that's sort of the same with us. Like, I might not always remember not to be a people pleaser or to, like, to understand that people and their emotions are not black and white. Like, but, and sometimes I forget these lessons, and that's why it's important for me to communicate these things. But then, like, you say it enough and it's like reinforced in the sphere of where you're working or what the content you're making, and it'll rub off on people, and it rubs off on yourself. I mean, you keep reinforcing these messages by like making content about it. And like now it's like it's really hard for me to date someone who I don't feel fully sees me as a person, like truly. And I think like I made a couple videos about this, about how like I think, and this is just like an example of it, but of like the advice that I give and like the things that I talk about on TikTok is like, because I've dated enough men who only see me based off of this, like based off of like my appearance, or like not even just that, but like on 1 or 2 dimensional levels. And it's and I preach about like, or I don't preach, but you know, I talk about how like I want someone who sees me as a whole person, and you should too, because if you don't, then you'll always be a 1-dimensional or 2-dimensional thing to them. And then how could they like truly love you if they only see you for what you bring to them, or like if they don't see you as someone who has whole emotions. And it's like, you know, so, and that's something I run into a lot in my dating life, is like guys who don't see me as like a whole person. But because I've like enforced this message and I think about it and I talk about it a lot, I can recognize very easily now when a guy doesn't, I can tell when a guy's like pretending to be something or to act as something because he doesn't think. And I think people perform when they don't see me as a person. Because if they don't come out authentically, like if they don't come as their whole selves, then that means that they're trying to appeal to a certain thing about me, which to me sends the message that you only see me as this one little thing that you're trying to appeal to, instead of just being authentic or coming as your authentic self. And that's something I really struggled with. But because I like constantly talk about it, like online and offline, that's something I just like don't really like. I don't do that anymore. And if I see it, then I like don't continue to do it. But it's like, so I think there is some value in teaching people, or like sharing your perspective on things and answering advice based on how you would honestly, as you know, your most mindful and highest self would react to things as a result. You know what I mean?
I think like to the point of feeling like you're only seen for like superficial things, it's like learning to show and be confident with those other parts of yourself that might not be like, because subconsciously you might know that, oh, they're only here because you're pretty or because of these things, and then you might subconsciously be playing into that and then denying other parts of yourself. And also recognizing that it's okay, again, like trusting yourself, it's like to show those other parts of yourself and see how they respond to it. And then if they don't respond in kind, then knowing that that part of you is still valid, it's just not compatible with them, and that's not anyone's fault. It's just like being able to recognize that sooner rather than later is actually the gift that you're giving when you're able to be yourself. And I also talk about this concept in a similar way, or like when people say like it's important to be yourself, it doesn't mean like making other people responsible for your insecurities and being just angry because you're angry, and making yourself this like free for all like open book. It's like
it's like someone who can't control their emotions.
Means like owning who you are, taking responsibility for how you feel, and then how you communicate that to the people that you care about or the people that you want to connect with. Because a lot of the times people will just either share too much and be like, I'm upset because you didn't text me back and this means that blah blah blah. Like, that's not being yourself. That's like being insecure. But like being yourself would be like, I'm feeling insecure at the moment. How do I process this? Where is it coming from? What type of relationship do I want? Like, being your higher self is being able to communicate this honestly with the person that you want to connect with, and then making that attempt, like, hey, I'm feeling insecure about this and this. Would we be able to talk about it? Like, how are you feeling? And then being able to explore what that means with that person, you being your higher self, and like, are they responsive to that? Maybe you're going to be given space that you maybe previously anticipated you wouldn't be given, or maybe you would be denied like validation of your feelings. And that's it's important to know that sooner rather than later, like, and being able to gas yourself up to make those, like, to have those uncomfortable discussions, because I've definitely been in situations where it's like something that's really small, like, oh, I have really bad period pain and I don't feel like seeing the guy that I'm seeing, and usually I would like find some way to like still follow through on my commitment to seeing this person and being like, it's okay for me to just say that I'm tired, and then say, maybe we can see each other another time. And every time I've done that and been like, hey, like, I really wanted to see you tonight, but I just feel so gross and I don't think I'd be good company, but like, maybe we can do something on the weekend instead of tonight. And then they're always like, oh, that's totally fine. Like, is there anything I can do? Like, I'll make sure that I have XYZ for you when I see you next. And it's like, it's such a relief for me to have had the courage to assert such a small bound, like, to most people that might be insignificant, to be like, I can't make our date. And then to also see how they respond to it. They do give you the space to do that. They're not like, well, you need to come over because you said that you would, and like, I'm trying to get my dick wet or whatever. It's like, they're totally okay with it. And then even if they weren't okay with it, being like, well, why do I even want to spend time with someone who can't give me space to rest when I need to? You know, it's like, being able to do that is what like being yourself means, and honoring your boundaries means, and being authentic. It's like, this is how I feel. What do I need? Who am I trying to be? How can I try to attempt to bridge that gap? And how is the person that I'm trying to connect with going to respond to that? Easier said than done, but
it's easier said than done. And it's taken me a long time to even do something like that. I used to be someone who never like says no, never stood up for myself. Like, and it really like harmed me. And sometimes it's okay to express like anger in a way that's like not always like poised, you know what I mean? Like, especially after someone's like wronged you in some way. But like, even just like expressing emotions, or like expressing that you don't want to hang out because you're tired, which is like a totally normal thing. It's like, when you recognize that like this is like something that's actually kind of difficult for me, and doing it anyways, and just like seeing how people react to that, that's like honoring. That's like such a huge indicator of someone that I want to be around, you know? And like, someone who respects my boundaries. My therapist says that like boundaries are like the bumpers on a bowling alley. Like, they progress relationships that have room for progression, or they stop relationships that don't have any more room for progression. And it's like they'll keep the ball moving forward, and they won't let things get chaotic and weird, because then it's like, okay, what if you did see that guy on your period while you were feeling gross? Then you would feel like resentful of him in some way, because you feel like you can't say no to this person, you know? And it's like,
but you didn't even give yourself the opportunity to say no, and then it's like, well, now I hate myself.
Now you hate yourself. And I think it's like, that's why it's really important to check in with yourself. Like, I hadn't seen my friend in like a couple like weeks, like probably bordering on like 2 months now, and it's really easy because we're both really busy people. And she was like, do you want to get dinner? And like, I was having like a really bad week and like a bad night, and I was like, you know what, I know I promised that I'd go out with you, but I am kind of an emotional wreck right now, and I think what I need right now is to just like be alone, go to sleep. I hadn't been sleeping because I'd had just like a really anxious week. And she was like, no, I completely understand. And it was like, oh, okay, like, good. I feel safe. Like, I feel safe when people like respond to that well, or like sometimes even like passive aggressively people will just like ignore you, and I hate like it's like that doesn't make me feel safe, and like I don't want you in my life. If you make me feel bad for having like human needs and emotions, and like not always wanting to do what you want me to do, like otherwise I just feel like this is just like a one-sided thing.
Yeah, and also like recognizing that the people that are passive aggressive about it, it's because they're probably resentful of the ways that they are over accommodating for other people in their life. So like, oh, how come you get to honor your boundaries when I never honor mine? It's
yeah,
like, well, we're all trying to figure it out.
Honor your boundaries then, girl, and go off.
Yeah, but yeah, even like in friendships as well, like being able to be honest with a friend, like, oh, I actually, especially for me because I'm freelance, it's like I can't be like I have to be in the office. Like I can technically do anything. If I don't set a boundary, then it's not being set by anybody. So being able to be like, oh no, I actually have planned to do X, Y, Z, so I'm not going to be able to do, I can't just get lunch today, and then being like, okay, cool. Whereas before, like if I was with a friend or like in a relationship, I would be like, okay, yeah, I can be free because I can be free, but like I might have I hadn't prioritized my priorities, and I was expecting maybe other people to do it
do that,
but it's like, who's going to do that? They don't know what you're trying to work towards or what you need to be doing.
Yeah.
And I think also, like finding the balance between like being able to be consistent and responsible in your relationships. Sometimes you are going to be putting in more effort or extending yourself beyond,
what they can give you.
Yeah. And then recognizing that is an exchange as well. Like sometimes your friend might be going through something and you need to be there for them to lean on, so that when you're going through something that they're there for you to lean on too. And then it's not so black and white in terms of like, oh, well, I'm not feeling up for it, so I'm just going to say no to everyone.
That could be the case with romantic relationships, with all types of relationships. Like the last guy that I was dating was going through a really hard time, and like in his life and like emotionally, and like I cared about him, and I didn't want to like leave him hanging, and that's what relationships are for. Like you can lean on me. I want to just know that I can lean on you too sometimes. And there's no reason to be resentful about it. But I do get what you mean about like, and I was telling you, like I'll tell the listeners, but like this guy had like ghosted me for like a year, and it was like really, really painful for me because I was like emotionally fragile, and like it was during the pandemic, and like other like extenuating circumstances which made the whole situation like complicated, but like I was affected. And when he like messaged me out of the blue, I felt like it was such a slap in the face to me, like because I had dealt with so much like emotionally, and like I like expressed anger towards him. It wasn't like a fuck you text, but it was like a, hey, like dude, I hate that you did this, and like think that this is like an appropriate response after like ignoring me for a year. And like he ghosted me from that, and I was just like, you know what, like I would feel shame because I was like, oh my god, like did I like overreact, like was I like really emotional at the time? Because at that time when I responded to him, like telling him like what his actions made me feel, I was also like emotional. But it was like, but that is like an objectively like not okay thing to do to someone. And if he would have been like, you know what, you're right, that wasn't cool, and I'm sorry, I would have been like, cool, like let's put it behind us, it's fine. I feel like no ways towards you. But when someone doesn't take it in kind, or when someone doesn't respond at all, that's like disrespectful. That's like another slap in the face. So it's just like learning to accept that we are people who have three-dimensional emotions, and like I'm not gonna be this person that's available for you to talk to when you feel lonely or sad or whatever. Like I'm like a person who when you disrespect me, I'm going to feel angry and I'm going to express that to you and why that was hurtful, you know? And I don't need to feel shame. And, like, I feel like, in a way, when I express upset or that I didn't like how someone did something to me or treated me a certain way, I feel like I take up too much space when I tell them, like, no, that's actually not okay with me.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't need to feel shame about that. I don't need to feel bad about having a normal human reaction to disrespect. Like, that was objectively disrespectful. And I have a right to tell you that that's disrespectful if you think you can come in and out of my life like that. And so, that's something I, like, struggle with, is, like, feeling valid in my emotions that aren't always positive and happy and, like, you know, and I think totally that's, like, a part of learning and growing.
Yeah, I think for you, like, being able to express how you felt and let him know that his behavior is not okay and you're not the one if he's going to try to fuck around. That's important for you to express the way that you did. And it's like, there's not, like, letting go of the fact that there's anything that he could necessarily do to make it better, because it's like, if he was able to do that, you wouldn't be in this dynamic to begin with. As much as disappointing as it is, or as much as it hurts, it's like, if he was aware of how damaging and selfish ghosting is, then he wouldn't, and he was capable of, like, doing better, then he wouldn't have done that. And if it was truly, like, meant to be between the two of you, then he would be able to communicate and you wouldn't have to, like, you wouldn't have had that response to begin with. Yeah,
exactly. And that's sort of what makes me, like, I let it go. But when we're talking about, like, validating our emotions, especially, like, when it comes to maybe having to have people confront the way that they made us feel, or, like, even just not saying yes to them and possibly disappointing them. It's sort of like this thing where it's like, that's not easy for me naturally to like, I always want to be on, and again, this goes back to, like, the people pleasing. Like, I always want to be on good terms with people, and sometimes that's almost to a fault. Like, even with like this specific person, I'm like, oh man, like, I don't want to be on bad terms with anyone. But then it's like, why not? Like, sometimes you are on bad terms with someone because they didn't do something that was like respectful, and that's okay too. Like, it's so crazy. Like, when I try to, like, make things right with people who, like, actually don't deserve it, like, it's just, like, that comes from, like, a people-pleasing, like, I don't want to be on bad terms with anybody, period. But it's, like, no, like, this is something I had to, like, also kind of remind myself of recently was, it's okay to sometimes be on bad terms with people. Like, I don't have to be your best friend, and I don't have to talk shit about you at every, like, every chance I get. I just leave you alone. You leave me alone, I leave you alone. Like, it's good. Like, it's cool. I don't like you. I don't like you, and that's fine. But it's like, it doesn't have to be all love, and it doesn't have to be all hate. It just, I can accept that there are people that I don't want in my life, that I don't want to see even, like, you know, and being okay with that without having to feel this obligation that I need to make things right. Because I don't want to have that
a clear-cut answer. Like, it has to be good or bad. And if it's not any of those things, then it's like you're going to be stuck in between figuring out which one it is. But just being okay with, like, I don't like this person. They did me dirty. No reason for me to like them. No reason for me to talk to them. No reason for me to think about them.
Yeah.
That's okay. It's like reconciling and accepting that you just don't, sometimes the answer is there is no answer, and, like, you just have to move on, and things will just naturally fall into place as long as you continue to honor yourself and, like, take what you've learned from this situation. Because like, why is it your responsibility to like someone that has made themselves so unlikable to you?
Exactly. And it's like, but I feel like I honestly think that it's like this thing about the way that we are socialized as women. Like, my mom, I kind of learned this from my mom, like, and and it's like a big thing, I think, in my culture, like, to not be on bad terms with people, even if they've done you wrong. Like, and I always took that because I was like, okay, being on bad terms with someone must mean that there's something, like, wrong with me, or, like, us, or both of us, and I just don't want to have that energy. But it's like, no, but, like, fuck it, like, people sometimes disrespect you, and there's no place for them in your life, and that's fine. And, like, just being like, yeah, fuck you, yeah. Like, fuck you, but I don't need to, but it's like, I don't need to do anything extra, like, go fuck yourself, but also, like, just stay out of my life, and, like, I'll stay out of your life, and that's fine. Like, we don't have to be on good terms. I don't have to be on good terms with everybody.
Yeah, and just being like, there's just no terms. Like, it's not even about bad terms. It's like, there are no terms between us. And it's hard, especially, I think, like, as women, because especially women that are aware of how fucked society is and how dangerous our experience can be when you really do feel connected to someone. It's easy to, like, pedestal them or be like, oh my God, this is the light that's shining through the darkness. Like, you are the exception to all of these fucked up experiences that I've had. Like, finally somebody that I connect with, or finally somebody who seems to get it. And then it's also just mourning, like, you're actually mourning the potential that you saw in this person, less so than the reality of them. Because when you look at their behavior, you're like, well, actually, you're not that lit. Well, actually, you didn't treat me that well.
And you were never that lit. Like, why did I, like, it's like, we have this really, like, amazing ability as women, I think, to, like, see the best in people and constantly give the benefit of the doubt, because I feel like we're never given that luxury. Like, like, if we, and, like, we need to, like, take a page out of, like, men's book. Like, once they show you who they are, you don't give them a second chance, not a third chance or a fourth chance. Like, just believe who they are. And as women, I think we are taught to, like, accept crumbs.
Yeah.
And
because
we're
so used to having people only give us that. Like, oh, okay, you get a chance, but, like, you're not quite like the boys, or you're not going to be able to do what we do yet. Like, you're a girl, you can stay at the front, at the back, or whatever. So it's like, we recognize that feeling of being left behind, and we're so grateful for any opportunity that we get to progress, that we extend that to other people. And to men, it's like, they know when things aren't working, and they're so willing to walk away from it, but they are so used to being given all these extra chances. So they expect that from you too. So when you're actually like, sorry, no,
fuck you,
they're like, wait, but every other girl has chased after me and begged for my crumbs when I've decided not to give them to them. Like, why don't you beg?
I fed you plenty. Yeah.
It's like,
why aren't they eating my crumbs?
Fuck off.
Yeah. And it's really empowering when you get to a point of, like, actually, I was a bit delusional about this.
Yeah, that was a low vibrational moment for me.
And I was in my flop era.
Yeah.
Now I'm
okay. How are we getting to the sleigh? But that's exactly it. It's like the way that you see potential in other people, and you're so desperate for them to live it out. That lesson of, like, it not working out is, okay, how do I actualize this potential in myself and my own life? Like, that's always the lesson that I've been given. Because I remember talking to a guy and him saying, like, he was realizing in real time, like, yeah, I guess men do kind of use women as, like, character development, because, you know, men aren't always ready. They're kind of, like, testing the waters, and it's not necessarily the woman's fault if he's not ready. And, you know, women are just kind of, like, collateral damage in, like, a man's self-development. And I was like, well, I don't necessarily think that's... Well, I think for his experience, he always felt like he was disappointing the women that he didn't, like, wasn't able to pursue a relationship with, because they always seemed to want it more than he did. And then he's like, you know, I'm just, like, so much more aware of what I want, and women are just kind of like, I'm using them to figure out what or whatever.
You don't know when in reality he doesn't know what he wants.
Exactly.
And he's using women who actually know what they want for his character development, and to use them as, like, therapists. And that's, like, that's actually so unfair. And then, like, I feel like what's funny is, like, when guys actually know what they want, meaning, like, when they've realized that they want a relationship, it's like, oh, okay, like, the circumstances in my life are right. So I'm going to be with this girl who's been here at this point in time. And I feel like women are waking up to this. Like, men use this as character development, and I've had this happen enough times to where I'm like, fuck this. Like,
yeah,
I'm doing this now. I'm investing in my own character development.
I think it's very common for women to say, like, I feel like I've been used by this guy, like, he's just moved on, blah, blah, blah. But I've always been like, what am I learning from this? Like, anytime I feel fucked over by someone in any context, I'm like, how am I going to do better? What am I going to learn? How am I going to elevate? So to me, when this guy said this, I was like, well, I mean, I feel like I use men for my character development because I've always gotten better after a breakup, and none of my exes seem to be doing better than me. So who's using who? And I think that's something that, you know, it's not about like a competition. It's not like, oh, we're just using each other. But it's like, how do you take the experiences that you've had to become a better version of yourself, to become stronger, rather than being defined by the ways that you feel like you may have failed or have been failed by other people. It's
well,
like,
I think it's like different for men, because I feel like when we say that they use women for character development, it's like they're using women, like they typically use women to evade any difficult emotion that they feel like they have to face. And so
like the development is happening differently for men and women. Like, men are coercing women into their own chaos to try to avoid it. The woman starts picking up the pieces for them because she's been conditioned to do so. When that doesn't work out, the lesson is that men, either they do or they don't face themselves. I would say most of the time that they don't until a certain point in their life, which is not up to you. And then for women, it's like recognizing that energy that you're putting into fixing this other person should be redirected towards you. And it's
that's
just like
always the lesson for me.
Yeah.
It's like you've spent this time trying to love someone who does not have the capacity to love you in the same way. And they're also, you know, using you as a way to avoid themselves.
Yeah. But I think the beauty of women is like that we're actually able to do both. Like, we are able to not only move forward and take these experiences and learn from them, but we're also able to harness this energy that we have, that we want to give to other people, and return that to ourselves. This kind of intimacy that we can create with people, regardless of romantic context or not, is something that is so difficult for men to do. Like, to the point where it's almost impossible for them to be able to experience intimacy without it being facilitated by a woman. And like, their inability to maintain it,
or at the expense of her.
Their inability to maintain it only reflects back on them. Like, it's never, I think it's so easy for us to constantly blame ourselves and think like, oh, I wasn't able to change him, I wasn't able to get him to love me the way that I wanted or the way that he wanted to. But it's like, it's not your fault.
Well, you know, in All About Love, Bell Hooks writes that women are the practitioners of love. Like, we not only know how to receive it, we don't always know how to receive it, because we are the ones that put it into practice, right? And men, like, their definition of love, my cat is like rubbing up against the laptop. It's so cute. She's like distracting me. Men's idea of love is mostly based off of how they're receiving love, whereas women, we feel like we don't receive it enough, and so that's why we're constantly in this state of like yearning for it. And I'm like, I don't want to yearn for it anymore. I don't want to. You either love me, you're either come ready to love me and accept me as I am, so that I can love you how you are, and we can help each other grow. But I am no longer anyone's fucking therapist. And that was like so empowering for me to like set for myself. And it happened after my last relationship too. It's like, I thought I learned this lesson. It's like, no, I just have to learn it in a different way now. Like,
there's parts of it that you didn't quite cover in the last experience.
It's a big topic. Love is too big of a topic. But and that is the beautiful thing about women, is that we truly do have the ability to heal people. Like, the depth and complexity of how women feel emotions, including love, is like honestly so powerful. And we're able to feel things in the room that, like, I feel like men aren't even aware of sometimes. And
well, you can feel shifts in them that they're not even aware of as well.
That they're not even aware of. And that's, like, the thing, like, we talked about this earlier, like, how women, like, we're so in touch with our emotional world, and that's probably because of our socialization and our just, like, you know, the way that we're sort of conditioned.
Yeah, and also just our nature as well, I think.
It's our nature. And then I feel like we're just able to, like, not only, like, have such a rich, multi-dimensional understanding of ourselves, but we are so skilled at that we also can sense it in other people in a way. And, like, a lot of times, like, a lot of, like, my ex-boyfriends, like, I will literally articulate something that they're doing and they're not even aware of it, and they're like, how the fuck did you know that? Like, that, like, I didn't even know that I was doing that. And I'm like, yeah, it's like, I just know, like, I just, like, I know you, like, I can, even if I don't know you, like, I can sense what you're doing, because I just, like, understand. I've gotten to a point where I've understood myself on that level to a degree that they don't even recognize themselves. But I've already, like, and so I guess this conversation kind of comes back in full circle. Like, how do you navigate love when you're someone who is more thoughtful and self-aware, and maybe the person you're loving isn't, you know? You know, sometimes it works if they're willing to learn, sometimes it doesn't. But, like, regardless, our ability to feel ourselves and other people is truly astonishing sometimes, you know? And, like I said, like, I've had boyfriends being like, how are you? You're, like, so intuitive. Like, you're so emotionally intelligent that, like, I didn't even recognize this in myself until you just said it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's scary for some people to be around that because they're afraid that it makes them seem weak, that they can't pick up on themselves the way that you can. And it's like they feel like you're going to be judging them because you
and
might
sometimes
see
people
ahead.
don't want to be seen to that degree.
And I think that for people that are afraid of that, it's like being okay and honest about that fear is the first step in overcoming it, you know, like being able to say to your partner or your friend or whatever, it's like, I feel like I'm being judged in your presence because you're able to live in a way that is, like, fundamentally different to me, or you are able to honor these things that, like, I'm not ready to do. And that's obviously hard for people. That's hard for people, but I think, like, I've definitely had more so friendships where people, like, it's hard for me to tell you the ways that the toxic things that I'm doing because I feel like you're judging me for it, and me being able to be like, I'm never here to judge you, you know, like, I always want to be able to create a safe space for you to feel open and honest about what you're doing and how I can support you through that, rather than assuming that I'm just going to judge you, you know, like, I hope one day we can laugh about these things as we have about previous things, but you can't, like, you can only do your best to show somebody that you're able to do that, and whether or not they're willing to take you up on it is up to them. And then another thing that you said about, like, you know, a woman's ability to give love and men being used to receive it, I think this speaks so much to, like, the post-breakup glow up, you know, like, women, when they realize the love that they're giving is not being received, and then giving it to themselves, giving it to their friends, giving it to their career after a heartbreak, there's always a period of time that passes when the guy goes back to distracting himself, thinking that he's on top of the world, until it hits him that he's not receiving the void that your love filled in his life. He tries to refill it with all these other distractions until he realizes that you were able to fill something that he can't actually do for himself, or he doesn't know how to do for himself. And that's when they come back.
And that's the sort of poetic justice of the universe sometimes, is you've already fulfilled yourself, or you filled your own cup with your own love, and you realize how special it was. And
You realize that you don't actually need them to be able to feel
You
that for
don't need them
yourself,
anymore.
you know? Or like
Yeah.
you're past the point of thinking that it has to be them specifically to do it for you because they
Yeah.
weren't ever able to appreciate it in the way that you can appreciate it for yourself. Your friends appreciate it the way that you're rewarded in your work in material ways for being able to express that passion, and like recognizing that there's going to be somebody that's going to be able to appreciate it the way that it deserves to be, not someone who
Yeah,
just needs
and
to test you to see if it's
and
really
like
worth
once you
it.
realize that this person can only love me at a capacity in which they've loved themselves, it's like I don't want that. I don't want your love anymore. Like
Yeah.
your love cannot, like, not to be like your love can't come close to mine. But I am someone who I don't judge. Like when I call my ex-boyfriends out or like the people I love out on the stuff that they do that hurts me, I'm never doing it in a place of judging. I'm doing it in a place because I want them to grow and I want them to realize that the things that they do hurt other people, which
Hurts
in turn
themselves.
hurts themselves. And I never want to be in a place in which I feel like I'm judging people, but it's like when push comes to shove and that relationship ends and I'm left picking up the pieces and I realize like this person could have never loved me because they can't even face these things in themselves. They're hiding from themselves and they're using me to do it.
Yeah.
And
they're judging themselves as well. That's why it's almost impossible for them to imagine that you wouldn't judge them.
yeah, exactly. And so when you go through the post breakup glow up and you feel like, you know, you've like given yourself that love, there's something really beautiful in realizing that the parts of yourself that wanted to love them were parts of yourself you needed to heal. But also the things that made them special were things that you saw in yourself.
Yes.
Like this guy I was talking to, I found him to be so brilliant. And I found him to be so emotionally intelligent and just there's a song, the song Snowing at the Beach by Taylor Swift off of her last album. She says something along the lines of like, I've never met someone that like lived from within. And like when I met this guy, he was like so interesting to me and he had just like such an amazing like internal world that I felt like I wanted to like get into your head and like just know everything about you. And when that relationship ended, I was like, but like I don't have access to this guy's like beautiful like mind and his like brilliance or whatever. And then I'm like, you know, actually I think I was just like recognizing my own brilliance in him. And that's why I wanted to like connect to him in this way. But it's like he actually wasn't really that emotionally intelligent and like really wasn't that great.
Not that lit.
Right? Yeah, so it's like, you know, there's something like it's painful to go through breakups. It's painful to go through any ending of any relationship. But when you realize these like truths, like these truths that get uncovered underneath all that pain, it's like it's beautiful what you find underneath that. Because really it's just love for yourself. Like your ability to love people is just a love for yourself that was misplaced.
Yeah, I really feel like it is a privilege to be a woman and having that experience, because being the practitioner of love, it's like you can also decide like where it's being received. But for a lot of guys that only know how to receive love, it's like, where do they even begin to learn to be a practitioner? You know, that's why it's so difficult for them to move. That's why it's like the first heartbreak they have is the one that scars them the most. If they never recover, it's like they literally don't know how to generate it within themselves. And they don't know how to hold on to it when someone offers it to them. Because I think this friend I was talking to, she actually kind of like had a thing with a guy that I've known like since high school. And I had like very casual thing with him. At no point was I ever like, I want to be his girlfriend, because I could recognize so clearly how emotionally avoidant both of us were and how incompatible our situations were. But we realized that the guy that she had been seeing and she was really cut up about was the guy that I knew. And she was like, it's crazy, like I was so in love with him, I was like crying about him, I can't believe I cried over him, he's such a loser, blah blah blah. And I was like, yeah, I'm surprised that you were able to like fall in love with him because he's so emotionally unavailable. Like, what is there to him that you could even like hold on to? Like, the man doesn't even have any interests. Like, I could not name a single interest of his. He's literally the most boring finance guy. You know, like he has a sense of humor, but still, it's not
Yeah.
like, wow, I'm so interested in like literally what is there to be, what is interesting about him? Like, if I didn't know him from high school, there's nothing about him that I'm holding on. And I was like, I feel like you literally were in his presence and he's like this emotional stone that your own emotions just ricocheted around the room and like went back to you. Like, you thought that it was him, but it was actually you just having a good time expressing yourself, experiencing your emotions, and like thinking that had something to do with him, but it all just was actually you falling in love with yourself, you realizing how
Yeah, it was
interesting
like
and
your own
fun
light
you
in the
are.
room. You're like a little disco ball in the room.
Yeah.
And he was just this.
Exactly.
He was just the screen. You were the projector, and he was the screen.
Yeah.
And that, yeah, that's actually, now that I think about it, that's exactly how it was with this guy who I was like, you're so brilliant. You're so amazing. And I think he was just asking the right questions for me to express myself. And it was like me. I was the disco ball in the room.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I've had guys.
And he was enjoying it too. And like, he was like, oh my God, this girl is like
saying
this
things that are
effervescent, like,
interesting that
life.
he hasn't heard before. And
yeah,
you
this
think,
like beautiful crystal butterfly, much like the one that's behind you right now. He's like, she's a beautiful crystal butterfly, and I had the chance to be a beautiful crystal butterfly, disco ball, and he was appreciating that. But it's like, he actually didn't reveal much about him. This was my world he was in. He was in my beautiful disco ball
exactly.
dragonfly room.
That's why I feel like it's actually quite easy to decenter men, because I'm like, how interesting are they really?
How interesting are they really?
When you really think
And I
about
just
it.
like, I think like I require men now, like I require so much more from them. Like, I want you to actually prove to me that you can love me, and a lot of the time they can't.
Yeah, because
Like, because they're not there yet.
Yeah. And I think it's also like the process of being able to fully own those parts of yourself that bring you to a level of being able to then meet your equal. Because I feel like I always talk about how I was like taking one step forward, two steps back in my own healing or personal development. I would make progress, and then something outside of me would come along, and I would think like, okay, that's enough. I'm just going to do this instead. You know, it seems like an easy way out, or it seems like I've done enough and I can let go of those habits and practices. Because that's really what it is. It's like a habit and a practice that you form that allows you to build like this, maintain this foundation, the garden of your life, right? And then suddenly something comes along and you abandon those things to be with this person or to do this other thing. And then the lesson is, again, like, you need to return, you need to maintain that foundation, that part of you, in order for there
It's
to
very
be
hard.
yeah, like a healthier experience.
Like, for me, I think it's like, I think about it, and I think it's because like we're conditioned as women to orient ourselves around a man. Like, we're conditioned to be wives and mothers and you know, just like all these things in which a man is the center. And as a result, like, we feed into this fear of us being alone. And then that's also something I want to talk about, because it's like, I have grown to enjoy my own company, and I'm at a place where I'm like, I don't need a boyfriend. I really don't. Like, I'm happy focusing on my career. I'm happy focusing on my other relationships and on myself. And, but like, I also like, I do feel lonely, and I would like a presence there. And I don't know. It's just like, how how do you reconcile the two?
I think for me, it's like, I have always been okay with being alone, and that I definitely have had like a head start in that, because I grew up as an only child to a single mom, and I was left by myself a lot. So that has its own trauma response. Like, can be hyper independent because I'm comfortable with my own company. And also in the last few years, I've gotten to the point where I'm like, if I want my close relationships to be like mutually fulfilling for both of us. Like, we are a positive presence in each other's lives. If I spend time with someone that I consider close to me and I get home feeling worse than I did when I left my house, then I'm like, maybe like on a consistent basis, then that is an indication to me that it's not as compatible as I would want it to be. And I've had situations where I've been with people who I care about a lot, who I have a lot of history with, and I come home and I'm literally like in the fetal position on my couch because I'm so emotionally drained from being around them. And it's not even like someone's done anything wrong, but it's just like I have to reconcile with the fact that we just are not like on the same page anymore. So that's also how I approach like romantic relationships too. It's like if you aren't able to like either maintain, because I also spend a lot of time on like being hot and having fun alone. Like I want to enjoy my own company. I'm okay. I would rather be at home by myself than go out of my way to be in the company of people that I don't enjoy.
Yeah.
And I feel the same way about my romantic relationships too. It's like if we're not like maintaining and elevating each other's state of being, then what is the point of us being together? Because I want to live a life of expansion and growth, and to have that facilitated and supported within me, so that and like support that in other people, like that's such a huge priority to me. I always want to be able to encourage my friends to like go in the direction of their best self, not encourage them to be defined by their insecurities, because I've had friends who, you know, you're like excited to tell them something that you want to do and they just shut it down immediately because they're like, well, you probably won't be able to because of this and that. And it's like, you can encourage your friends to be practical, but you shouldn't like shut them. They're being vulnerable with you, sharing something that they want to pursue, and you're telling them that it's not going to work. Like you don't want to do that to yourself. You don't want to do that to other people. So that's something that I think about when it comes to romantic relationships. And I think that in the same way that when I've been in a relationship, I've had moments where I wish I was single. When you're single, you're going to have moments where you wish you're in a relationship. It doesn't invalidate like the need
Those
for you to be
emotions.
single in this moment, you know. And like it doesn't mean there's not going to be a time when a relationship will enter your life, but I think it's like being okay with feeling like lonely. Like you're allowed to feel lonely, because you will feel lonely like at all points in your life, regardless of what your external circumstances are. There are times
You
in
can
your
feel lonely
relationship,
while you're in a relationship.
yeah, where you'll feel lonely. Like, and that doesn't mean that you don't need to be in that relationship anymore. It just depends, like, to what extent do you feel alone in your relationship. Of course, there's going to be moments where your partner is like focused on other things, you're not able to get your needs met. Whether or not you're able to communicate to each other and then like come to a resolution about that is going to define whether you need to stay in that relationship or not. And I think it's also the same with like being single and coming to terms with being alone and being in your own company. Of course, there are going to be moments where you're alone and you feel lonely, but it doesn't invalidate the importance of having that time to yourself, and it doesn't make the possibility of you being connected to other people like invalid either. And I think another thing for me is like, because I don't really use, well, I don't use dating apps. I only used them in like 2016, dated like one
I
person
quit them
from it.
completely.
Yeah. Like the ways that I have met people in general in my life that I hold close and dear to me, and the way that I've met people that I've become romantically involved with, it's like I could never have predicted that that's how we would have met and that's how we would have
Yeah.
connected. So I always leave space in my life for that unknown. So it's like, it's not like I feel like I can control it. And I think sometimes when you're on dating apps, or when you have like where you're always like putting your energy towards pursuing romance, there's this illusion of control or like outcome, that like if I put in X amount of energy, then I'm going to get this type of relationship or that type of outcome. But for me, I always feel like as long as I'm like preparing myself and like looking after myself and doing my best and extending myself in the areas that I feel ready to, then I can't predict like how a work opportunity will come to me, how the opportunity for friendship will come to me, the opportunity for romance will come to me either. And I think that it can be scary to like relinquish control or the illusion of control for those things, but I've always been open to like things just happening the way that they happen. Like I could never have predicted the way that I would have connected with any of the previous relationships that I've had. And I think that's the beauty of them as well. Like even though they didn't work out, it's still like, wow, I met him through this person or at this event or through this whatever.
And just accepting and like liking how that happened and like letting it go afterward.
Yeah, and it's happened before, so there's no reason why it won't happen again. As long as I'm still doing what I'm doing and making sure that I'm growing and moving forward, then the next experience will be better than the last.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
This was such a lovely conversation.
Yay! Thank you so much for being on the show. I'm so happy you were able to do this.
Course.
We'll record another episode for Hot and Insecure.
Yes, you have to come on my podcast now.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you so much for being on the show. I'll speak to you soon. I will leave all your links in the show notes so people can find you. TikTok, Instagram, YouTube.
TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. Those are the big ones. I have a Twitter, but I'm only on it to write Taylor Swift lyrics and other lyrics.
Yeah.
And just to see what's up in pop culture, but I don't tweet a lot.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Nadine.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.